We are recording.
Okay, thank you. We'll call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Council on Access and Fairness. Shannon, can you make our housekeeping announcements, please?
Yes. Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Council on Access and Fairness meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference, and so please be aware of your surroundings behind you. All Council on Access and Fairness meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select Enable Auto Transcription. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth, could you please take the roll?
Yes. Yemi. Kamal.
Present.
Hera. Cecilia.
Present.
Jezreel. Kristen.
Present.
Angelica. Yusuf.
Present.
Shalak.
Present.
Michael.
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you. At this time, we'll proceed to public comment. The council did receive 2 written comments that were submitted in advance of our meeting. Those comments were reviewed. They were distributed to all council members. They do address matters that fall outside of the COAF work plan, so we won't address them further here, but they were forwarded to the Committee on Bar Examiners as they were relevant to that committee's work. We will now hear oral public comments, if there are any. Before we begin public comment, I'd like to remind everyone that under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, public comments must pertain to items that are on the agenda or be related to matters that are within the jurisdiction of COAF. COAF is the Council on Access and Fairness, and we support the Board of Trustees on effectuating the State Bar's diversity and inclusion goals and objectives. That includes the pipeline to the legal profession, retention and career advancement, and judicial diversity. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Shannon, are there any public comments at this time?
No, there is no one indicating that they'd like to speak.
Thank you. We'll proceed to item 1.1, which is the chair's report. And this is my first meeting serving as chair of COAF, so I'm very happy to welcome everybody here. That's all of our new and returning council members, our wonderful State Bar staff, liaisons, and members of the public. Welcome to our meeting. I feel very strongly about COAF's mission, the importance of our work, and really helping to build a bar that reflects the rich diversity of experiences and backgrounds that we have in California. One of the main items on our agenda today will be reviewing and approving our work plan for the next year. As you're going to see, COAF has taken the lead on issues and projects that are central to California's attorneys and California's aspiring attorneys. I want to just give one example, if you'll indulge me for a minute, about COAF's recent work that I think highlights how we have really been the vanguard in addressing diversity and inclusion in our profession. Earlier this month, former California Chief Justice Tani Kantil-Sakaue spoke at a conference on the California Supreme Court, and there she discussed what she described as a wave of impending retirements among attorneys and the potential for a brain drain, in her words, among attorneys that would affect the legal profession and California's wider economy. She noted that there's a swath of people, particularly in younger generations, that have been left out of 4-year degree programs, in large part due to financial considerations. The Public Policy Institute of California, where she is now executive director, has identified California's aging state workforce as one of its top research issues. The bottom line, to me at least, seems clear. We have to do more to attract and to retain attorneys in order to serve California's 40 million people. So just a few weeks after the Chief Justice made those statements, COAF hosted its 2024 Virtual Diversity Summit with over 100 people. And among the many topics that were discussed were the changing diversity of California's law student and attorney population, COAF's work to better understand how the State Bar can partner with law schools and other organizations to attract and retain more individuals in the profession, and why attorneys, and particularly attorneys from underrepresented groups, are disproportionately leaving the profession before retirement age. And it was COAF that was the driving force that led to the Inactive Attorney Survey, which launched for the first time recently in order to investigate issues around retention and advancement. And the survey and the discussion that we had, those are just really the first steps to better understanding and ultimately addressing why attorneys are leaving the profession, and what we as COAF and what other folks in the State Bar and other organizations can do in order to better protect Californians that rely on our attorneys and on our court system. And I have to admit that when I think about COAF as being involved in that work and being the chair of COAF during this time, it's a little bit daunting. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but I'm comforted by seeing all of you here today and knowing that we're a group of folks who care passionately about these issues and that are ready to do the hard work of the council. And with that especially in mind, that I am happy to welcome our three newest COAF members who are all in the room with me today, which I'm very happy to do. That's Kamal Chowchki, pardon me, Yusuf Zakir, and Cecilia De Leon. We're going to go around because we have a little bit of time today, and everybody's going to introduce themselves, new and returning members and our staff members alike. And I also want to introduce two of our new organization liaisons who are both on Zoom, and I'm happy to see we have Judge Monica Diaz, who is our new Judicial Council representative, and she's a member of the Judicial Council Committee on Providing Access and Fairness. She's from Fresno County Superior Court. And we also have Eric Silber, who is our new liaison with the California Lawyers Association. He was a prior past chair of the CLA litigation section and the CLA civic engagement section. So certainly looking forward to working with both of you in those capacities. And before we move to introductions, I do want to thank two other people that are really central to this organization and to the work that we're going to be doing in the next year. One of them is sitting across from me, our vice chair of COAF, Shalak Guinness, is brilliant is the word that I'm going to use on all things related to COAF's work, but especially legal education and pipeline issues. And then Elizabeth Hom, of course. We could not do anything without Elizabeth. I'll just put it that way. She keeps us going and keeps us on task. And I can't say how thankful I am that you are here with us today and here with us every day and doing the important work. So what I'll ask now is that we go around the room and just do very short introductions, because it is the first time, at least, that some of us are meeting each other, and we do a lot of work together. So it's nice to get to know each other a little better. I'll start. I'm Michael Rhodes. I'm a judge in San Francisco. I'm the chair this year, and this is my third or fourth year on COAF. Fourth year, Elizabeth is telling me. I told you I rely on her for everything. And I sit in San Francisco Superior Court. Why don't I just go around to the right, if that's okay?
Sure. So I'm Elizabeth Hom. I'm a program director at the State Bar's Office of Access and Inclusion. I'm primary staff to the Council on Access and Fairness. And for those of you who may not know, our office manages the work of the State Bar related to access to justice, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. In addition to the work that we do here with COAF and diversity, equity, and inclusion, we also administer grants to legal aid organizations across the state. For 2025, we'll be distributing over, I think, close to $300 million to 115 legal aid organizations and public defender offices across the state. So that is a large part of our work. But I think we all know that access to justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion are closely intertwined. So it is really like my honor to be able to work on those issues together.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I'm Hilika Salceda. My day job is with I'm a director at the ACLU of Northern California, but I'm based out of our Fresno office. So I'm in Fresno County, and it's always a pleasure and welcome.
Good morning, Cecilia De Leon, one of the newer members. I currently, my day job is at the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco, which is what we call a banker's bank, so our customers are financial institutions. I've done a lot of work at the bank. I've been there for 25 years, which makes me an anomaly these days. But one of the areas that I do support is our diversity and inclusion office and our chief diversity officer. And so when this opportunity came up, given the work that I've been doing for him, was really interested and just looking forward to engaging and helping out where I can.
Hi, everyone. I'm Komal Chokshi. I am the first Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. And I've been in that role a little over 2 years. Prior to that, I was the first Chief DEI Officer at the University of California's legal department. And prior to that, I was a medical malpractice attorney. So lots of big career changes there. Nice to meet everyone.
Everyone, Yusuf Zakir, really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm the Chief DEI Officer at Davis Wright Tremaine. We're a national law firm. I've been there for 4 years, been doing DEI full-time for 10, and prior to getting to the space was a litigator practicing securities litigation, but have been doing DEI full-time for about 10. But yeah, one of the newer members and excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hi all, I am, oh, sorry. All you saw was belly. I am Shellac Guinness. I am Dean of Students, Diversity and Belonging and Career Development at Pepperdine School of Law. I've had the honor of being on COAF for, I'm looking at those about 4 years, I think. This is my 4th. And it's just some of the best work that I think you all will be able to experience doing. I really feel is the work done through COAF to think about the structural things that can be done to enhance access to our profession and support the public and support attorneys current and future. And so thank you all so much for all that you're going to do. We have lots of work planned for you. So thank you all so much. Tristan.
Hi, I'm Tristan Higgins. My pronouns are she, they, and this is my 2nd year, I think, on COAF. I am the CEO and founder and an attorney of Mediclusive LLC. It is an internationally available diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging firm. I do consulting for large institutions, educational, entities, and corporations. This has been my passion for a very long time. Before I started doing this particular work, I was a corporate entertainment and transactional high-tech lawyer. I'm really honored to be here and to be back. So thank you very much.
It's great to have you back. Judge Diaz.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Judge Diaz. I'm a sitting Superior Court judge in Fresno County. I am your liaison from the Judicial Council's Committee on Access and Fairness and Justice. And I am recently appointed to the committee, but I look forward to working with all of you. It sounds like very important things that we need to attend to. So I look forward to meeting and working with all of you.
Thank you for being here. And our other new liaison, Eric Silber.
Hi, thank you. It's great to meet everyone. Judge Rhodes, I think, already mentioned my history with CLA. I'll say that although I'm here in my individual capacity, in my day job, I am a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles.
Great to have you as well. Shannon.
Hi, I'm Shannon Crossley. I'm a program coordinator with the Office of Access and Inclusion, and I support COAF meetings.
Thank you, Shannon. Abraham.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am Abraham Gutierrez. I am at the Office of Access and Inclusion with the State Bar of California, supporting the work of COAF.
Thank you. And Raul.
Hi, I'm Raul Duran. I'm an Assistant General Counsel in the State Bar's Office of General Counsel, and I support COAF.
Thank you. I know that took a few minutes, but not too long. And I just have to emphasize that our work here at COAF is never about one person or never just one person doing all the work. It's about coming together, people from different organizations, parts of the state, different professional backgrounds or practice areas, because we're addressing complex challenges that are at different stages of becoming an attorney or being an attorney. And we need to be working together to make a difference as these issues change and develop, and our work changes and develops along with it. So I look forward to collaborating with all of you as we tackle these issues. So let's get to work, and we'll move on to item 2.1, which is the director's report. Elizabeth?
Thank you. So I have two items that I wanted to provide an update on to you all today. The first is the sub-entity sunset review process. As some of you may know, in 2019, when the State Bar became a purely regulatory agency, the Board of Trustees implemented a review process for all sub-entities, including COAF, for all committees, councils, commissions, et cetera, that aren't statutorily mandated. So this process occurs every 5 years. And you all should have received a survey about this. And this survey was sent to current and past COAF members. And so thank you for those that responded and provided feedback. The board did receive an update on the review process at their November meeting, and will receive a final recommendation and proposal at the February 2025 meeting. I don't anticipate there will be any major changes, but this is a process that we do go through every 5 years. And then the second update that I have is related to the Legal Aid Leaders Fellowship Program. For those of you that may not be aware, as I mentioned, in addition to the DEI work that we support, we also support grant making, and the governing body overseeing the grant making is the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission. We also are primary staff to that commission. They kindly invited COAF to review applications for their grant program to fund summer law students at legal aid organizations. We had a 2019 California Justice Gap study where we looked at public interest drift. So a lot of times law students will go to law school with all intentions of going into the public interest, but because of debt load and other financial obligations, they are then not able to do that and go into the private sector. What we also know is that student loan debt most acutely impacts students of color, and so to combat this and to create a pipeline of attorneys into legal aid specifically, the commission worked with the legislature to be able to direct some funding for summer law student fellowships, and so we were able to administer these funds in 2023, beginning in 2023, and with support from the California Access to Justice Commission, the Legal Aid Association of California, and California Change Lawyers, we were able to request an amendment to the statute to direct even more money to it for 2025. So for 2024, we funded about 75 law students at legal aid organizations in the summer, and we are currently reviewing applications for 2025. We project we'll have about $1.6 million to distribute for 2025, which is actually double the pot from the prior 2 years. And the committee is actually meeting on Monday to make recommendations. I want to thank Judge Rhodes and Kamal for their work on the working group, helping to review, I believe it was 58 applications that we reviewed in a very, very short time frame. So I really do appreciate your time and efforts. It was a lot of, I think, meetings and calibrating, but I think we'll ultimately have a really great result and be able to fund, I believe it's 100 and don't quote me, but like 150 plus students for 2025, which is very exciting.
It's fantastic. Any questions? No questions? All right. We'll move to item 3.1, which is approval of the September 6, 2024 minutes. We'll note, because I had to do a little bit of research, that under Robert's Rules of Orders, you may vote on the minutes even if you weren't present at the September 6 meeting. Are there any comments or proposed edits to the September 6 meeting minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Shalak?
Second.
Second from Angelica. Thank you, Angelica. Elizabeth, roll call vote, please.
Yemi, Kamal?
Here.
Tara? Cecilia?
Here.
Jezreel? Tristan?
Are we saying here or are we voting in favor of the minutes?
Voting yes or no on the minutes or abstaining.
Yes.
And let me just clarify
Okay.
these two.
Oh, I didn't
both-
know that. I thought we were, for some reason.
Yeah, sorry, it's a roll call vote.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh,
So,
Kamal?
Kamal?
I approve.
Cecilia?
Approve.
Angelica?
Hi.
Yusuf?
Yes.
Shalak?
Approve.
Michael?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have 7 yeses, 0 nos.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 4.1, which is an update and discussion on the follow-up study of racial disparities in the attorney discipline system. I know that our Deputy Chief of Mission Advancement, Ewing, isn't here today, couldn't be here today, but we have Senior Program Analyst Josiah Sweeting with us, who's going to give us the update. Good morning, Josiah.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Right, I will go ahead and share my screen.
And while Josiah is doing that, I just want to acknowledge Jennifer Zelnick from our office, who's also here to support this project.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Didn't mean to leave you out.
Not at all.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
We see the deck where it's not in presentation mode. There, now we see it. Thank you.
Awesome. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. As the chair mentioned, my name is Josiah Sweeting, and I'm here to provide an update on the 2024 Attorney Discipline Disparity Study with some progress and some preliminary findings. But before I start, I do want to give a special acknowledgement to Yen Zeski and Alexander Harris, who are staff members here at the State Bar, who have contributed and are continue to contribute to this project and make it a success. All right, so first I want to give some background into some of the research questions as well as the research design that are driving this project. And so the first one mainly being, has the State Bar of California made any progress when it comes to addressing racial disparities in the attorney discipline system? And so to do this, we have 3 different components. And so the first one being the replication of the original 2019 study for the same cohort. So for the 2019 study, it was attorneys who were admitted between 1990 and 2009, and it included discipline outcomes that occurred between 1990 and 2018. Now, since it's 5 years later, we're moving that cohort a little bit forward to 1995 and 2014, and we're capturing discipline that happened between 1990 and 2023. So again, 5 more years of data. And so in addition to replicating this original study, we're also interested in extending the original study to include some more individual level demographic factors to kind of help better explain some of the associations that we may see in our different analyses that we do. And then also in addition to that, using a couple of different statistical analysis or approaches that I'll touch on a little bit later. And then finally, looking at a time varying analysis, with the first being just a simple descriptive analysis that basically looks at the trends in particularly the outcome of probation and disbarment for each race, ethnicity, and gender identity group. And then also looking at doing event studies. So when we say event, we can mean like a certain thing happening. So this can be a complaint, this can be probation, this can be disbarment. So creating like mini projects and looking at incorporating a comprehensive set of control variables that may influence the likelihood of things like probation, disbarment, and then also complaints. And moving on to research question number 2, basically, are there significant disparities based on firm size and practice area? Previous research that the State Bar has done has shown that solo practitioners as well as attorneys who work in smaller firms tend to disproportionately receive complaints from the public, which we've also kind of found in the original 2019 study that complaints also typically relate or associate with discipline outcomes. So in addition to that, also practice area is another, depending on which practice area attorney works in, they may be more or less likely to receive complaints, which also can then relate to discipline. So just doing a deeper dive into the association between discipline outcomes as it relates to firm size and practice area. And with research question 3, looking at the actual factors that influence the volume of complaints related to disciplinary outcomes. So, the original study was looking at the association between these demographic factors and discipline outcomes. But it's also important to kind of look at the factors that before the discipline, what is actually contributing to different groups maybe getting these disproportionate number of complaints. So really also doing a deeper dive into that first step before we actually get to those discipline outcomes. And then finally, with research question number 4, do we observe any race or gender identity differences in attorneys transitioning to inactive status? So this was actually brought up by Dean Guinness at our previous meeting, which was an excellent idea. So basically, as the chair mentioned, earlier this year, the State Bar produced a profile of inactive attorneys, basically showing the numbers in terms of who is going inactive status and who's going inactive status at earlier times compared to other groups. So really wanting to incorporate that kind of work into this as well. So is it that attorneys who are receiving these complaints in this discipline, is that also contributing to them going inactive as well? So once again, just including more of that status piece into this new 2024 study of attorney discipline disparities. All right, so I'm going to present just some very, very brief preliminary descriptive results. And so everything that I'm talking about here, the study is analyzing disciplinary records that span from 1990 to 2023. Once again, the original study was in 2019, so it included disciplinary records from 1990 to 2018. So really adding that additional 5 years to capture additional 5 years of data. And so when we first look at the rate of probation, so what we see here is the comparison in the percent of Black male attorneys who receive probation versus the percent of white male attorneys who receive probation. And so in the original 2019 study, we saw that in the 1990 to 2009 cohort, the rate for Black male attorneys of probation was 3% compared to only basically 1% for white male attorneys. And then if you fast forward into this later cohort of 1990 to 2014, we see that there's not a whole lot of change. It looks like both groups increased a little bit in terms of rates of probation, but we're still seeing that kind of disparity in between Black male attorneys and white male attorneys when it comes to probation. And then moving on to disbarment. Once again, this is also looking at the comparison between Black male attorneys who receive disbarment versus white male attorneys who receive disbarment. And so we see in the original 2019 study, we saw that essentially it was 4% for Black males and just over 1% for white male attorneys. And then if we fast forward to this later cohort, we see that across the board, disbarment went down a little bit for both groups, but for Black male attorneys specifically, it went down almost a full percent. So instead of being 4 times as likely, so 4 to 1 in the original cohort, it's now 3 to 1, which is still a disparity, but something that is trending in the right direction. But it's also important to take these results with a little bit of a grain of salt because these are preliminary, and we are still exploring some of the reasons or associations between these differences that we're seeing. All right, and then just to give some broader context for all of the kind of variables that are being included in the analyses and the models that we're running. So this first kind of set deals with the demographic level indicators, and we've kind of grouped these in kind of 3 buckets, dealing with personal characteristics, attorney and firm/organization information, and then also law school and California bar exam information. And so also just for ease and convenience, everywhere you see a star denotes a new variable for the 2024 study. So essentially, it was not included in the 2019 study. And so for personal characteristics, we see a number of different variables that have been added. So dealing with age, sexual orientation, transgender identity, disability status, and several other variables. When we look at the attorney and firm organization information, we see firm organization size. As I mentioned previously, practice area is in here as well. Sector has been included as well. And then also getting back to status, which I mentioned previously. And then finally, when it comes to law school and bar exam information, we're including law school type as it relates to attorneys who graduated from law schools accredited by the American Bar Association. Those that are CALs are accredited by the California Bar Examiners, and then also those schools that are registered with the state bar. Also looking at graduation year. And then in terms of exam information, looking at the number of times an attorney took the California bar exam, the year, their overall score, and then also the MPRE exam score. And just to reiterate, not all of these variables will be included in our final models, but they will kind of be explored to see if they actually make sense to include in the analyses that we're doing. And now moving on to some of the more outcome variables or the dependent variables in our models. Once again, 3 buckets here, the first being complaints, the second being investigations and pre-filing, and then the last being the actual discipline. And so complaints, we just want to get a sense of the number of complaints that are received, the year. And then it's also important to note too that complaints, every complaint has a specific allegation associated with it. It can have a number of different allegations, but we also want to get a sense of the kind of allegations that are associated with each one of these complaints. And then finally, when an attorney is admitted to the state bar, we also wanted to get a sense of what is the average time, what's the general time that it takes from the time that they're admitted to the time they get their first complaint. And you'll see that variable at the end of all 3 of these boxes in terms of investigations, pre-filing, discipline. We want to get a sense of the time from admission to each one of these kind of major events in these outcomes in terms of the discipline system.
Josiah, I'm sorry, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Oh, you might be getting to this. Never mind. Keep going.
Okay, will do. No problem. All right. So in terms of investigations and pre-filing, so it's also important to know that when a complaint comes in about an attorney, the state bar will evaluate that complaint for merit. And so if it is found that that the complaint does have some merit, it'll move on to the investigation stage. So not all complaints go into investigation. So we wanted to kind of have this as the next step in that kind of discipline process. So this is the number of complaints that actually are forwarded to investigation, including the year. And then something that was highlighted in the 2019 study as a significant association was the number of investigations that occur with counsel. So it's essentially if an attorney is going through the discipline process and they have counsel representation, it was found that you're less likely to receive discipline if you actually have attorney representation in the midst of the case that you're in. And then also the number of pre-filing cases. So this is also the next step as well. It's related to investigations, but it's also that kind of next step. And then also, as I mentioned, the time from admission to the first investigation as well. And then finally, discipline. The kind of most severe or the last level is when a case actually makes it to the state bar court, which is typically where discipline is doled out. So we want to get a sense of the number of state bar court cases that an attorney has, the year that it occurred, and then obviously the actual outcome. So this can include things like public and private approval, probation, and then the kind of most severe discipline being disbarment or resignation. And then also the year that the discipline occurs, and then once again, the time from admission to the first discipline that occurs. All right. And so, yes, the first 2019 study, there were a lot of eyes on it. There were several critiques. And so we wanted to be mindful and attentive to the critiques that were received on that study. There's a document that captures all of these critiques. I won't open it for the sake of time, but I will kind of cover some of the more major criticisms that were included. So one of the things that was included dealt with the number of explanatory or demographic factors that were included. A lot of people kind of pointed out the fact that there could have been a lot more, several more variables that could have been included to kind of help explain kind of these associations between these outcomes for attorneys. And so that's why you saw so many different variables being added for that demographic, those demographic pool of variables. And specifically, a big one that was asked for was the practice area kind of focus in terms of, you know, attorneys practicing in different areas tend to get different types and volumes of complaints. And also another criticism dealt with the statistical approaches that we're taking. Some of the critiques dealt with the fact that they didn't feel like the approach was rigorous enough for the analyses that we were doing. And so working with our external researcher, we are doing this analysis a number of different ways using a number of different models, regressions. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of kind of the details, but basically really trying to cover all our bases and look at this problem from as many different angles to verify that the results that we're reporting are sound and solid and can stand up to any criticism. And then in addition to that, one big one was also related to the unit of analysis. So in the 2019 study, the primary unit of analysis was looking at attorneys. So basically everything that happened related to discipline for an attorney. But another alternative way to do it could have been the unit of analysis of like either the complaint or the type of discipline. So being that you could have an attorney, you could basically use that complaint or that discipline outcome as its own kind of unit of analysis and take away the kind of attorney's personal information on that complaint and just looking at it in a bit of a different way. So yeah, and then if there are any questions, I will take questions now.
Any questions or comments from anybody?
Yes.
Hi, Josiah. Sorry, you couldn't get away. I'm just wondering, and you might have said it and it went over my head. What's the timeline that you anticipate for completing this new study?
Yes, so we plan to present these results at the February Board of Trustees meeting. So early January or early to late January is when all these analyses should be done.
So then we may hear it at the March meeting? Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Josiah, I might have missed this, but you, as one of the variables, did you look at the type of setting the disciplined attorneys worked in, solo practitioners versus small, mid-sized firms?
Correct. Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyone else? Nope. Thank you, Josiah. I look forward to, I know a lot of us do, I definitely look forward to hearing from you in March and to seeing the final report. And for folks that haven't read the original Farkas study, it's definitely worth a read, and I think we'll add some additional context to the new report that we get. Thank you for all of your work on that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we will move on to item 4.2, which is an update on the Office of Admissions review of unaccredited law school rules. Pardon me, Elizabeth.
Typically my colleagues from the Office of Admissions would come to provide this update, but they are in their own Committee of Bar Examiners meeting today. So I will read their report to us. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update and for your participation, engagement, and insights. The Office of Admissions staff wish they could be here in person, but they are working today at the Committee of Bar Examiners meeting, which is right next door to where we're sitting in LA. So the Committee of Bar Examiners continues to review the rules for unaccredited law schools. Staff appreciated meeting with COAF members Dean Guinness and Judge Rosie regarding work to date to gain their feedback, and we would welcome an additional volunteer now that Judge Rosie has completed her term on COAF. The proposed changes for this year continue to focus on clarifying the rules, ensuring that they are evolving as legal education evolves, particularly in the area of online education. The proposed rule changes are also meant to drive improved outcomes at registered unaccredited law schools, informed by analysis of enrollment, attrition, and exam outcomes. After an introductory discussion in August, we've been reaching out to law schools, public the public and COAF stakeholders. And a second version of the rules is being discussed today at the Committee of Bar Examiners, happening right now. The second version incorporates feedback received through these discussions with COAF and the Committee of State Bar Accredited and Registered Schools. In addition to discussing the specific proposed changes, continuing discussion will take place regarding broader policy choices, including setting a minimum cumulative 5-year bar exam pass rate similar to that required of accredited law schools, exploring the introduction of a similar minimum pass rate for the first-year law students exam, considering the role of standardized tests in making admissions decisions and informing students of the options available to them, exploring options to improve retention and licensure rates. We will share results of the discussion at the next COAF meeting and would welcome an additional working group session. The goal is to complete the updates related to this review for the Committee of Bar Examiners next meeting in January. If you would like to learn more, the staff report for this topic for the Committee of Bar Examiners is available on the State Bar website.
Thank you. I'm sure Elizabeth will do her best to field any comments
Yes.
because she's standing in. Any comments or questions for Elizabeth?
If I could just make one, I want to add my encouragement for someone to join me on that working group. I won't go into my long soapbox, but I think it's incredibly important and meaningful that COAF weigh in on and can thoughtfully consider the impact of all of our law school types in California, including the regulation of our ABA schools, but particularly as those of you who have had a chance to review the profile that was thoughtfully published by the State Bar in the last year, or were at the Diversity Summit earlier this week, might have seen that the California accredited schools and registered unaccredited schools educate substantially more students of color and first-generation students, and we might hypothesize students with lower incomes and perhaps in more rural areas as well than our ABA accredited schools, which I think means that we have a duty to ensure that those schools are meaningfully and thoughtfully engaging with those students and creating meaningful educational opportunities. And so please, anyone, maybe not anyone, someone,
Are we looking
I hope
for-
will join that working
We are-
group as
we are-
they call
Yes,
for it.
and we are looking for a volunteer, but you do not need to feel the pressure.
You do,
to
this is
volunteer
like
at this
church,
moment.
is there one at this moment? But yes.
One more member or two? One more.
I'm happy to join.
Okay,
Angelica, thank you.
wonderful.
It is very, very meaningful, and I want to also express my appreciation to Elizabeth, through you, to your colleagues in admissions for being so receptive, from both myself and Judge Rossi, who neither of us are known to mince words and thoughts, and being so receptive to our thoughts and our feedback and our engagement, and recognizing that for both the State Bar and for COAF, it's coming from a genuine desire to ensure that everyone who's seeking an ability to become an attorney in California has that opportunity in a way that's really, really engaging with them and not taking advantage of them.
Thank you, Shalak.
Thanks, Angelica.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You made a great pitch. I can sit down.
And just for some context, we will be asking for working group volunteers going forward, given that we've cycled some folks off and are cycling some new folks on. So there will be more opportunities to volunteer and get on those working groups. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay. Seeing none, we will move right along to 4.3, which is our update and discussion on the DEI Leadership Seal Program. And we have Danielle here with us for the next few of our items. Danielle, welcome. Good morning.
Hello, good morning. I'll go ahead and share my screen. As I'm doing that, I can do a very brief introduction that you didn't ask for, but I will take the liberty anyway. My name is Danielle McCrae, and I'm a lead program analyst in the State Bar's Office of Access and Inclusion. I've been with our office now 3.5 years. I'm looking at the calendar, making sure that math is right, and work on several of the DEI projects in our office, and have been lucky to work with several of our new COAF members in other capacities already. So very excited to have you all join. So yes, I am here to give a brief update on our DEI Leadership Seal program. So I'll start with a brief program overview for our newer members of COAF and a refresher for our returning members, and then provide some recent updates and give you all a sense of what we're looking toward in 2025. So the DEI Leadership Seal program launched in 2023, beginning of last year, and it is a program that is available to all legal employers that employ California attorneys, regardless of kind of where they sit in the legal sector. So that can be law firms, in-house counsel, law schools, nonprofits, government agencies, etc. And what the program is a list of 10 action items, DEI best practices that the State Bar staff have identified with the help of several different stakeholder groups. So there's that list of 10 action items, and to participate in the program, an employer must commit to implementing at least 5 of those in their workplace. Once they've made that commitment, they are a committed employer. They then have 1 year to implement 5 or more of those action items, at which point they can be recognized as a SEAL recipient. So there are a couple tiers to the program. Employers who implement 5 or 6 are recognized as bronze tier recipients. If they implement 7 or 8, they are silver tier. And if they implement 9 or 10, they are gold tier recipients. And our seal recipients quite literally get a little seal that they can use on their web and print materials to show to the world that this is a priority for them and a commitment that they've made as an employer. So in the second year of the program, this is what our participant numbers look like. We have 70 SEAL recipient employers and 29 currently committed employers. So almost at 100 total, right? Just shy. But of our SEAL recipients, actually, most, so we have a plurality, are gold SEAL recipients, which is great to see. 29 gold, 21 silver, and 20 bronze tier recipients. And we have seen among our SEAL recipients a real desire to advance tiers, really seeing some movement among those groups, which is exciting. We are also currently reviewing materials from 6 employers who submitted what we call tier advancement applications, which approximately quarterly, we allow employers that are already in the program to submit materials if they want to either switch from committed employer status to SEAL recipient status, or move up tiers, from bronze to silver, silver to gold, etc. So there are a couple of those in the works right now. So these numbers might change slightly in the very near future. Over the last several months, primarily in September and I think early October, staff conducted some focus groups with employers that are currently in the program. So we did sector-specific focus groups and also grouped them by SEAL recipient and committed employers. And so we ended up having 6 different focus groups to gather feedback on the program and the action items. And some of the goals of that were to hear about what action items have been easier or harder for folks to implement, and also hear if there's work that they're already doing that isn't incorporated in the program that we might want to have as a new action item or a different action item in the future. So around thinking about what action items have been the easiest for folks to implement, action item 1 is around collecting demographic data on employees. A lot of employees were doing this in some capacity already or thinking about how to do it. So that one has been easier. Another one that has been easier, or a lot of organizations were already doing, is sharing publicly a DEI statement, which is action item 5. Some of the action items that were harder to implement involved integrating DEI DEI into performance advancement and compensation decisions. So making that part of the performance evaluation process or part of that conversation when you're looking at promotions. And then also incorporating DEI responsibilities into leadership team members' job duties. Interestingly, but perhaps unsurprisingly, why the action items were difficult varied by sector. So action item 9 around incorporating into performance and advancement was harder for nonprofits because of unions or needing to get board approval, whereas it was harder for some firms and government agencies because of more rigid pay scales and frankly just kind of inability to be flexible in some of those decisions. Employers were also mixed on some of the other action items, like those related to annual implicit bias training. Some thought it was a pretty low bar, actually, and they were already doing it, whereas some employers were worried about having too many required trainings in a given year. So really interesting conversations we had with employers on that front. Something we also talked about with the focus groups, as I mentioned, was discussing, initiatives or activities that they were already implementing that are not currently part of the program and we may want to consider incorporating in the future. So a lot of employers have employee resource groups of some iteration already in their workplace. Also, there were several employees that spoke about having somebody on their DEI committee or their DEI staff team on all job interview panels, as well as having DEI specific questions in their interview question lists, or at a minimum having, again, that DEI committee or staff review the question list that's going to be presented at all job interviews. Something that also came up again and again and again in these focus groups was a real desire for more resources and more opportunities to discuss and share best practices with each other. So as context in developing this program and thinking through what resources the State Bar can and should make available to employers, we hesitated a little bit to have like a list of recommended trainers or trainings, for example, because we didn't want, as the State Bar, to necessarily be endorsing one trainer or training over another. But that's something that employers really desire in some capacity. So we're thinking through if we can do something like gather recommendations from employers in the program and then share that list of recommended trainers or trainings, and so that it's not coming from the State Bar. The State Bar is not endorsing one trainer or program, but instead kind of crowdsourcing that information among the participating employers to then disseminate back out. There's also some interest in the State Bar providing template materials for some of the action items that require documentation. So we're investigating, talking through both internally and with the focus group, or excuse me, the working group, what is possible there. Also to the point on more opportunities to talk to each other, there was interest in having something like a listserv or office hours or more frequent convenings. The State Bar already does a couple diversity summits, and all of the DEI Leadership Seal program employers have been invited to those summits, but I think there is some interest in having additional convenings that are specific to those employers. So I'm thinking through what that might look like. And so in thinking about 2025, this is at a high level what our calendar is looking like for next year. We will release the application for the next cohort in January, and that is due in March. That's been our sort of annual cycle the last couple years. In the middle there, we'll have one of our tier advancement applications for those that are already in the program. The application that we release in January is for new employers to enter, but then we'll have that smaller tier advancement opportunity for those that are already participating. That implementation window also closes for our cohort 2 employers, and then kind of sprinkled throughout here, we're thinking about having office hour opportunities for those participating employers to be responsive to what we heard from the focus groups. So that is what our calendar is looking at a high level. And then just additional goals and things we're thinking about for 2025. I touched on most, if not all of these already. There has been a desire to think about how we can increase brand recognition and brand prominence. So when I stop talking in a second and ask if you have any questions, if you all have any ideas around how we might do that, would love to hear those. And also we plan to reconvene the working group on this, particularly to talk about that point in the new year. Also, as I mentioned, updating existing resources or providing additional resources where we can, things like updating our existing resource guide, thinking through if we can provide a list of recommended trainers, templates, that sort of thing. And then also in internal conversations and in the focus groups have heard an opportunity to clarify some of the documentation requirements for the current action items. There did not seem to be a lot of appetite for changing the action items themselves in the next year or so, but thinking through how we can just be clear with employers what exactly we're asking for, why we're asking for it, to help minimize some of the back and forth that inevitably happens during application review. I think that we're going to have that regardless, but we might be able to cut down on some of that back and forth with employers through just clarifying our requirements, making those a little bit more streamlined. So that is the last slide that I have prepared. I will stop sharing my slides just so we can all see each other, but happy to pull anything back up if anybody wants to look at something again. But happy to take questions, ideas, comments.
I have a question. Danielle, is there any kind of deadline for employers that are currently participating to advance to another tier, or can they like choose to stay at silver for 2 years and then put in an advancement application?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is no deadline. We have this kind of rolling tier advancement process, and so we have an opportunity for employers to advance tiers approximately quarterly, but there's no requirement that an employer do so after a certain amount of time.
Anyone else?
I had a question about the, Danielle, about the kind of promotion element, like you said, in terms of raising the profile for it. I mean, so we, DWT, we're a silver seal, but I'm wondering, you know, do we do any sort of spotlights on folks who are receive that recognition? Is that one way to potentially raise the profile?
Yes, so we do some kind of social media posting around, certainly when like we have a new cohort of folks that join the program, or like a big batch that sort of advance together, that we always put on social media. We've talked about doing kind of more focused spotlights, and we've done that, but with transparently not a lot of regularity. So I think we could think about how to do that more strategically, but there has been some element of that in the past.
Danielle, oh, sorry.
Please.
Something that came to mind, especially reflecting on the Diversity Summit, which I'm sure someone's going to get to shortly, was coming out of that, the desire for more partnerships. So I thought perhaps one way, you already identified a really good way around it looking like the state bar was recommending anybody by saying, which I think is really smart to say, like, 5 of our gold recipients, you know, really recommend these trainings or materials. And perhaps that's also another way to spotlight people, like DWT has really loved this, and then they might feel like a, you know, little pat on the back or something. But I wonder if there's a way to engage more partnerships, maybe between SEAL recipients. So I'm thinking particularly for smaller, I know there's a wide variety across like sector areas for those who participate in the program. I'm thinking about smaller firms or nonprofits that may not transparently have the resources for the more expensive trainers or materials. If they had an opportunity to partner together, and it might be that, you know, one who's had one might be willing to say, we really recommend this, and then that might be the convening where it's not the state bar putting on this training, but the state bar is facilitating all of those people at the bronze tier connecting together, and then them reaching out to and bearing the burden, the cost burden at least, of trainings and so on, just in the spirit of collaboration. And also, again, just recognizing that for many people, it's a resource issue as well, not necessarily a desire issue. The other thing I thought was, I know that around diversity summits, there's sometimes been conversation about having smaller convenings by sector. And I wonder if that's a way to kind of do 2 or 5 birds with 1 stone, is to have smaller convenings by sector that are also maybe helmed by, or priority registration is given to SEAL recipients. So if it's smaller and you say, hey, we only really want 40 participants, the first chance to register is given to SEAL recipients so that they feel like there's a benefit, and then it's opened to non-SEAL recipients. Maybe the same for a diversity summit, right? Like there's a summit and then there's an additional workshop for an hour that's only open to SEAL recipients, at least for in-person ones, where again, or I guess not just in person, but again, where there feels like there's some type of benefit, there's something that's promotable, right? And SEAL recipients are given the opportunity first, blush to sit on panels or something that might help to hit both.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think that's great. We do informally tend to reach out to our SEAL recipient employers first for panel opportunities. But I really like the idea of giving employers in the program potentially priority registration or kind of an additional workshop on an event that's already taking place.
I have some related comments. So the focus groups that you did were fantastic. The government attorneys had a lot of discussion after the fact because we had just so much in common in terms of limited resources. And one of the things that came up, I think, after the focus group was the fact that at least for the government, we often fall under kind of a citywide or countywide framework that might make us very different than law firms. So for instance, in San Francisco, we have an Office of Racial Equity, and they have certain requirements for all departments. So that's something that I think might be factored into action items that you decide to include in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment in term, I don't know if this is not really direct promotion, but it's certainly encouraging the program. So as someone who hires outside counsel quite frequently, in the last few years, as part of kind of our questionnaire firms, we obviously ask some diversity related questions. But one of the things I was thinking that we could maybe add to that questionnaire is, are they a participant in the SEAL program? And while they may not be, they will at least become aware of it, and maybe as a marketing tool they can start to look into it, because I think those things matter, just like the diversity issues have mattered more and more over the years. Firms really step up when they know that an organization is looking for diverse representation on the work that they'll be doing for our organization. So it just thought of that. And so to the extent that you have companies that hire outside counsel, maybe that's something they could add as they are interviewing for outside counsel, or maybe make it a recommendation for their firms that they're already working with.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. We had a conversation with an organization that was along those same lines. They were trying to learn more about the DEI Leadership SEAL program. I think because they were interested in either adding it to their interview or kind of checklist they send to outside counsel candidates. And also I think we're considering whether it's something that they should maybe not require of outside counsel, because that might be too far a stretch, but that they were looking at and thinking through that relationship too. And I think that's an exciting one to potentially leverage. So thank you for bringing that up again.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Danielle, you have your work cut out for you with all these suggestions. These are great.
Yeah, no, this is exciting.
Thank you for all of your hard work on it. We'll move to your next item, Danielle, which is item 4.4, update and discussion on the Diversity Summit.
Yes. So this one I don't have any slides for, as just a brief oral update, but then happy to hear comments and questions. Earlier this week on Wednesday, we hosted a virtual diversity summit via Zoom. We had great turnout for it. I think we ended up having about 140 folks on Zoom. And that was across DEI leaders and organizational leaders across California's legal profession. We were also particularly excited. This diversity summit, we prioritized sending invites and outreach to law schools. And that was, we always had some law schools kind of in the room, but we had much more for this summit, which was very exciting. The program included a data presentation by Elizabeth and Ewing, who's in our Office of Mission Advancement. we called it From Entry to Exit, a holistic view of diversity in the legal profession. So it was really looking at data from several different state bar reports, including profile on California law schools, the diversity report card, and profile of inactive attorneys, to really look at the full kind of life cycle of an attorney in California. What does diversity look like in the California adult population? And then as a kind of comparative point, and then the population of various demographic groups in law school, in each class of new bar admits, the attorney population overall, and then in folks that are leaving the profession and transferring to inactive status. So that was a super compelling data presentation that we started with. And then we had two brief but jam-packed panel discussions from several deans across the state, and then several employers, really thinking about and talking about how law schools can retain and support attorneys of color and getting them kind of to and through the bar exam, and then also employers recruiting and particularly retaining some underrepresented attorney populations, keeping them in the profession. Because we see, for example, that Asian attorneys are transferring at much higher rates for reasons that are not related to retirement, and also at much younger ages. So thinking about, as just one example that we saw in the data, how to retain those folks in the profession. And I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to Shalak, who was on our dean panel and kind of quasi-moderated, led that dean panel, and also did some brief closing remarks for us. Always willing to do really anything we ask for in the diversity summits, is very much appreciated. Other panelists included Dean Jay Freichberg from University of West Los Angeles, who is the new chair of the State Bar's CS Bars committee, as I understand it, and also Dean Justin Cruz from Chapman. And then the employers represented were Tracy Broadhead, who's the executive director of the California Minority Council Program, Bianca Page at O'Malveny, and Jennifer Rodriguez at Youth Law Center, which is one of the State Bar's legal aid grantees.
Fantastic. I always think it's impressive that we get that many people on a weekday from 10 to noon. It's really, really something, and it speaks to all of the work that you've been doing and that the council's been doing to reach a lot of different folks in a lot of different places and bring them together. If there are any other comments or questions about the Diversity Summit, I have a question, which is, do we have our next one slated yet? I know you just finished, but people are asking for more.
People are definitely asking for more, and looking at the feedback from the survey, that's come in so far, there's a lot of like, this is great. We want longer and more of them. And we don't have any calendared yet for next year. We certainly anticipate having one or more in 2025, but I don't think we've kind of mocked out where those would be.
I think we wanted it. I know last year for the 2024 work plan, COAF wanted one in person and one virtual. And so when we get to that discussion, or we're going to have it now, like, is that what you would prefer to do again? Because that's what we can start planning towards.
Yes.
Okay, done, check.
I like in person. I would love if it alternates between Northern and Southern California. That'd be helpful.
For in person?
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would probably be more possible for 2025. Just given the space situation in our San Francisco office, I think that's been settled now. So I think we will be able to have a space to do that.
I have a vague recollection of maybe a couple years ago, I think there was an industry-specific summit. Is that coming back possibly, or was it something that we decided not to do going forward?
Was that the breakout one where like it was a big diversity summit? I remember a bunch of breakout rooms in one.
We've done breakout rooms, I believe, and then we've also done sector-specific summits on Zoom. I think we did that in 2020.
And we've done sector-specific, well, this was pre-COVID to sector-specific in-person summits as well. I don't know. I mean, it's a good question about whether having sector-specific diversity summits would be helpful, or if that's too many diversity summits and too much work for our state bar staff, who put in an incredible amount of time and effort to get everything together.
I mean, if it's something that would be useful, we can certainly look into doing that.
I think even breakouts might do the trick. But I did find it useful, like especially the discussion on Prop 209. It was useful talking to, public sector attorneys about that.
Breakout sessions might be the nice middle ground and an excuse to extend it to the extent that we can.
Yeah, no, it's good feedback to know about the timing because Danielle and I struggled a lot with like, well, we know people are super busy. We don't want to take up too much time. So that's good to know that there is a desire to have that time together.
Tristan?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I like that there's a Zoom option. But I do think that if one of the goals is to bring people together, that is much easier in person. And if we do sector specific, again, that's kind of separating folks. But I think I'd like to see the State Bar spending its time working on bringing people together. I love the idea of alternating between Northern and Southern California, but I don't know that we should spend a lot of energy doing sector specific things. Maybe providing sector specific resources would be good, or the breakout rooms, as you suggested, I think is a good alternative. So.
We do our Southern California one in San Diego and go visit Tristan.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think that's part of the like balance and conversation we've had internally too, right? Is part of what we were really excited about for this most recent diversity summit was to have so many people from law schools in the room and be able to talk with employers about, how do we bridge that gap or, help folks get from one to the other. But I also can appreciate that there are sector specific realities that could really bore out in the DEI Leadership Seal focus group. So I wonder if the breakouts at a larger event is the happy middle ground, like you said, Chair Rhodes.
I wonder if a sector specific thing could be maybe a meeting series that is just online. Maybe because then it would be a lot, I think, less burden on the resources of the staff. Maybe not burden, but less of a pull on the staff to say something like, over the next, I don't know how many sectors we have that we have identified, but over the next 6 weeks, we're going to have every other
okay?
week. Yeah, I just had an award fall down. Well, anyway, that if we do something like every other week, we could have a phone call that's for corporate, the corporate sector or the government sector. And then, you have maybe one staffer, one committee member that's there to kind of help with the discussion, but it's less use of resources. And I don't know if Komal would think that would meet the needs she was talking about, but that might be a really good idea.
Yeah, I think even something quarterly like that could work, especially if they chose a theme like, this time we're talking about exit interviews. Because I think that adding a little bit of focus can help. Otherwise, people kind of go off in different directions. But I think that's a good idea.
Can I add as well? I think one of the things is also, and I think about this from like other summits or conferences as well as these ones, is we tend to move on to another subject and not really give people space to discuss and bear out. So I'm thinking like, for example, the June Diversity Summit, where there was all of that great talk around generational differences and everything. And then what would it have looked like to have a sector-specific Zoom call a month later where different sectors are talking about what those generational differences look like in their workplaces and how are they. So it's building on it. And to our earlier conversation with Diversity Seal, maybe that's only available to the Diversity Seal participants, right? That follow-up conversation from the larger Diversity Summit, also so that people are getting an ongoing benefit and we're not just sort of throwing information and then going like, hope you did something with that, but actually bearing it out for them in practice.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that tie-in, Shalak.
Fantastic. Anybody else? Great, Danielle, your to-do list just keeps growing and we appreciate it so much.
Of course, happy to
And looking forward to the next update. Our next item is 4.5, which is the update on research on innovative DEI practices. Abraham is going to be giving us this update.
Great. Hello again, everyone. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. My name is Abraham Gutierrez. I'm a program analyst at the Office of Access and Inclusion with the State Bar of California. As mentioned, I'll be providing an update on the Innovative Practices Research Project. I want to thank the working group members present, Sheila Guinness and Tristan Higgins, and also acknowledge a former member of COAF who was on the working group, Annabelle Coleman. So first, I'll give a little background on the project. Throughout 2024, the Office of Access and Inclusion performed research on DEI practices in the legal field and other sectors, such as the higher education and medical fields. The goal was to identify innovations in the DEI sphere that COAF may want to develop or integrate into its work, or just devote more attention to. That research was presented to COAF throughout the year, and the working group met to identify specific projects that were both interesting and within the purview of COAF's mission. So first, and unsurprisingly, I think there's been a lot of attention this year on the emergence of artificial intelligence and its integration into virtually all sectors and aspects of work. So in particular, the working group identified the importance of attempting to assess and provide resources to mitigate potential inequities in the process of employee recruitment, retention, and advancement in the legal field. Second, the working group wanted to strengthen support for attorneys and legal organizations working in underserved rural communities, and that those perspectives were considered when designing new or updating existing DEI practices. I'll provide more details on our next steps for these two projects on the next slide, but I also presented at the last meeting of COAF an interest in developing an MCLE training, which placed greater focus on some of the aspects of DEI that may not receive as much attention, such as age and generational differences and disability inclusion. This project is going to require some more research to explore the feasibility of developing an MCLE project, identifying other educational opportunities, and also expanding research into the other facets of diversity that may need additional attention, such as neurodiversity. So for next steps on mitigating bias in AI, we'll be reviewing and assessing AI tools currently in use in employee recruitment, retention, and advancement decisions in the legal field. We're hoping to engage with employers of attorneys who are using these tools, so they might help us identify the effectiveness of the tools when we consider potential biases that might be introduced by the tool. Ultimately, we hope to be able to provide resources to help employers of attorneys adequately assess and monitor the AI tools they're using. And for the project on rural perspectives, the goal is to highlight and increase awareness on the challenges faced by attorneys and legal organizations in rural areas. The working group wanted to acknowledge and address the potential bias towards the urban perspective when we're assessing DEI practices and innovation. So for next steps, we'll study the data in the attorney census and place a focus on the rural attorney population. We'll be reaching out to organizations, firms, and affinity organizations that serve these communities. One of the goals is to apply a rural perspective and potentially highlight the rural perspectives in existing DEI initiatives, the diversity summits, and the diversity report card. And the other goal is to develop best and new practices by continuing to research innovative and effective strategies that are designed and refined to address the DEI issues in rural communities. And that is my update. I think we'll be talking more about that when going over the work plan for 2025.
Thank you, Abraham. Any questions or comments? I know we are going to be getting into some of this during the work plan, so we might be addressing those then. Okay, great. Thank you. We will move on then to item 4.6, which is an update and discussion on the early pipeline to the profession outreach materials. Elizabeth?
Yeah, so, and I would like to just provide some background on it, and then maybe defer our discussion to our work plan discussion, if that's okay. Okay. For some of you may know that COAF has developed some outreach videos that are have been posted on the State Bar's website and YouTube channel. And there's been 2 videos, one with General Counsel from the Golden State Lawyers and one with I think her title is lead counsel or head of legal rather at Lucasfilms, and we were able to get those videos developed and produced by those organizations. And so COAF has had many discussions on like, well, what to do now, because there's a lot of resources to produce those videos, and also there's also a lot of other attorney jobs that aren't, sports or entertainment that people interested in the law should be exposed to. So that's an ongoing discussion that COAF has had. COAF has also updated a brochure available on the State Bar's website. It's called Want to Be a Lawyer, and it features some diverse attorneys, including the Chief Justice in the brochure, as well as outlining various paths to the profession, and also challenges, including funding to be able to go to law school, et cetera. So those are kind of the outreach materials that COAF has focused on in the last several years. And I think, the video discussion warrants probably more thought about it. And I think in our work plan discussion, we can kind of flesh that out a little bit more.
Okay. So with the idea that we may be deferring a lot of this discussion to the afternoon, are there any questions or comments right now? No? All right. I'm sure we'll have more to say. And then we'll go to item 4.7, which is the update on the implicit bias online MCLE module. Elizabeth.
Yes. So thank you to Angelica and Novella Coleman, who recently turned off of COAF, for your work on that. The module is almost complete. So this is a online MCLE module on implicit bias. It's available to all California attorneys on my State Bar profile through the State Bar's e-learning platform. We developed it initially, I believe, 3 years ago, and then updated it this year. We are almost finished with the development of it, and so we'll be posting it in the next probably month or so. Hopefully it will be able to catch all the folks who will be reporting MCLEs shortly. So we will continue to monitor it to see if there are comments about it, feedback. We got a lot of comments from the first iteration of this module, which really informed the development of the second module. So we did try to take it up a level to not just a basic implicit bias course, but acknowledging that a lot of attorneys have a lot of exposure to implicit bias trainings, so that it wouldn't just be like a 101, more like a 201. So we will keep you posted on how that gets rolled out.
So is the 101 still going to be there? Is the original one still there? Or is it being replaced?
So this will replace the 101. We actually worked with our Office of Professional Competence. There is a new attorney training, a 10-hour training that all new attorneys are required to take. And so we've put a similar 101 course into that training.
Excellent. Any questions or comments? None? All right. We are
very early.
Very early. We're ahead of schedule. We're missing some of our liaisons, but should we do our liaison reports early? Okay. So the bulk of our afternoon is really going to be going over the work plan. But if our liaisons are available and willing to do their updates a bit early, we'd be happy to do that. Judge Diaz, would you like to start us off?
Well, if I could figure out how to work my computer. All right, so I'm happy to report on some of the Committee on Public Access and Fairness projects and accomplishments for this year in the 2024 annual agenda. First of all, the Language Access Signage and Technology Grant Cycle 6 launched its fiscal year 2024-2025 in March 2024. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. In November 2024, the council approved funding to 18 courts in the amount of $2.16 million for language signage and technology related projects. And then secondly, under the project titled Public Outreach for the Online California Courts Self-Help Guide, A language drop-down feature was developed on the redesigned California Court Self-Help Guide, which links to newly translated web pages and existing multilingual resources in the top 8 most spoken languages in California. Outreach was conducted to ensure the multilingual resources and translated information, including materials for remote court hearings, are known to the LEP communities throughout the state. Additionally, in 2024, PAF, through its Racial Justice Working Group, officially launched the Racial Justice Toolkit, an online hub for the court staff for educational resources related to racial justice. The toolkit was presented to trial court staff statewide at various informational remote and in-person sessions in 2024 that included audiences ranging from trial court presiding judges, court executive officers, and self-help center staff. Updates to and presentations of the toolkit will be ongoing throughout next year. And lastly, staff continue to provide weekly statewide training to self-help center staff on a wide variety of subject matter, including family law updates, form changes, and the CARE Act implementation and remote proceedings customer service. The 2025 PAF annual agenda is in the final stages of approval with the council. And in the future, I'll have additional updates on I'll have additional updates and meetings with you all. Any questions? All right. You know what? I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
There was an echo.
We
There we go.
were muted. Sorry about that. I was just saying that the new court's website is really fantastic, and the health center, or the self-help portion and all of the language access resources are really impressive and improved.
Right.
So glad to see that being rolled out. Any questions from anybody? Thank you so much, Judge Diaz. It's really good to have you here.
All right. Nice seeing you too.
And Eric, would you like to give us the CLA update?
Sure, and I apologize. I don't really have a full update for this meeting. I will for the next full meeting. I'll just note, because I'm much more familiar with what the litigation section has done than CLA wide, but I'll note that CLA, the litigation section for the last several years has offered and partnered with local bar associations, particularly affinity bar associations, to provide bar study scholarships. So people who aren't going to firms and don't get a stipend to study for the bar, to give people some money to be able to study for the bar exam and live during that period of time. And so we, as I say, we've done that for the last several years, and we've continuing to do it now.
That's fantastic. And I know I think we gave you 2 days notice before this meeting. So I appreciate you being here. It's been a while since we had a CLA liaison, and I'm very happy that we've got one now and going forward. We look forward to your next update too. Any questions for Eric for CLA? No? Okay. Oh, and Tara is here. I'm sorry, Tara, you joined us at some point, but I wanted to welcome you. We've been doing introductions as we've been going through. We have a number of new council members and new liaison members as well. So Tara, do you want to just do a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure, happy to. I came in at the summit, so it was a great time to come into the meeting. My name is Tara Davis. I'm the Chief Diversity and Talent Development Officer at Kenobi Martins, an IP firm based in California with offices across the country. And I have been with COAF for about a year now, and I'm very excited to continue on with COAF in 2025. But welcome to the new members who are joining us. It's a great group to be a part of.
Thank you. Glad that you're here today. I think then we're going to take our lunch break a bit early. Oh,
We can take our lunch break a little. Our lunch is not quite here yet, but we can break early and then come back. We could come back at like 12:45. Is that okay? Is that too much time?
that might be too. Can we come back at 12:30?
Sure.
Does that work for everybody? If we do an hour break starting now, we'll come back at 12:30 and get into the work plan. I'm seeing lots of nods. All right, wonderful.
Great.
So we'll see you at 12:30.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We are back and being recorded. I hope you had a pleasant lunch break. We are going to go right back into our agenda, and we really just have one item, although there are 3 items on our agenda, 4.8, 4.9, and 4.10. We're all going to sort of consolidate into this discussion of the work plan that will include additional DEI initiatives that COAF will be working on in 2025. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth, who will facilitate much of this discussion.
Yes, and sorry, I should have joined the Zoom so that I can share my screen in advance. So let me do that. And while I'm trying to click a lot of links right now, what I'm about to share on the screen is the 2024 work plan with track changes on. I met with our chair and vice chair earlier this month, or maybe earlier last month, or met with them earlier to kind of discuss the various items and kind of the statuses of them so that we could kind of hit the ground running with the discussion with the full group.
And as we're going through this, so you'll notice, and Elizabeth will go through, that our work plan is really structured around the strategic plan goals that are set by the Board of Trustees. So there are limits to the things that COAF can do, things that are within COAF's purview. We certainly encourage you to suggest new items for the work plan or additional tweaks to the work plan, but knowing that there may be things that are outside of the work plan possibility, either because of the strategic plan goals and the structure that the Board of Trustees has set out for us, or also because of funding or other time issues. So we do want your input, your suggestions, your ideas, and we will do our best to incorporate them into the work plan if and where we can.
Great, thank you. Great. Okay, so hopefully everyone has had a chance to take a look at least the 2024 work plan. Our work plan always starts with this COAF charge, and I don't think there's any changes to be made to the charge, so I will just move forward to the plan itself. And so as Judge Rhodes mentioned, all of the work plan activities for COAF are tied directly back to the State Bar strategic plan. Our current plan runs through 2027. And as all of you know, all of our plan goals are rooted in public protection. And diversity, equity, inclusion is like a through line that runs through a lot of our, or all of our strategic plan goals, and you'll see them under strategy and implementation steps. So for the first item here that you see struck, this was to review an outside counsel program for attorneys in the attorney discipline system. Unfortunately, this outside counsel program has not been implemented due to funding reasons. And at this time, there are no plans to implement it. Should the State Bar implement a similar program, we can put it back on the work plan. But for now, I think it's best to remove it. So if that's okay, we can move to the next.
Any questions or discussion on that point? No, thank you.
Okay. And then so our next item is related to rules of professional conduct, Rule 8.3 and 8.4.1. COAF has asked our Chief Trial Counsel to come to our meetings to provide data on these rules and how they, whether there are complaints against attorneys citing to these rules, and what the race, ethnicity, gender of those attorneys are, and to see if there are any interventions or actions that the board might take in response to that. I think in the past, I think 8.4.1 is new. Mm-hmm. And so we haven't gotten data on that, but our Chief Trial Counsel will come to our first meeting in 2025 to provide that data.
And 8.3 is also relatively new, and so it's related to reporting. 8.3 requires reporting misconduct, very nutshell version of these. And then 8.4.1 has to do with prohibiting discrimination, harassment, and retaliation But again, a number of comments have dealt with making sure that they aren't being weaponized against certain attorneys, and just getting more information about what the implementation has looked like has really been what we've done. Any questions or suggested edits?
I just remember that being a concern when 8.4.1 was being debated, even about being approved. I remember, I think, COAF having conversations about ways to ensure, is that the one that also dealt with civility?
Yes.
Am I remembering correctly?
Yes.
8.4.1
yes.
also has like a subpart that relates to civility?
I don't believe the rule has a subpart related to civility,
Maybe
but
the
I think at
comment?
the same time that rule was moving forward, COAF received a presentation from our Office of Professional Conduct that included a proposal related to civility guidelines. And those civility guidelines have been forwarded to the Supreme Court, and we are awaiting their response.
Okay, yeah, and I remember the concern that that message around civility would actually be weaponized against the people who are most likely to be treated uncivilly, and perhaps their response would then be used against them. And so I'm just very glad that it stays on there and that we'll have a presentation.
Great. Our next item is related to the racial disparities in attorney discipline system study that you heard from Josiah on this morning. They will be coming back at to our March meeting to present on the study. I think we can leave this item on to, and I just changed the date to March because I do think that COAF's involvement will end after receiving the report and providing kind of the reaction to the report then. Yeah, and I anticipate that the board will likely have kind of larger plans for what to do with the findings of the report. And if COAF is involved in that, we can add that back to the plan. So this next set of strategic of work plan activities are for goal 2, which is related to access to and inclusion in the legal system. And so the first item is related to the bar exam. As you all know, that there will be a new California bar exam. And so COAF will have the opportunity to provide feedback and input on it before it's deployed.
Any questions, comments? Okay. I'll do my best to keep asking, but feel free to jump in if I don't ask specifically.
Yeah, and we struck portfolio bar exam because the Supreme Court has indicated that's not the direction they would like to go in. And then, so attorney census, continue to review attorney census data. That's just an ongoing activity that COAF will participate in. The next item is to review the attorney census survey and make recommendations on questions related to retention, advancement, compensation, and satisfaction. As many of you will recall, the attorney census has 2 components. One is demographic information that we collect every year from attorneys. And then every few years, we have a longer survey, which asks questions related to retention, advancement, compensation, and satisfaction. We hope to deploy that survey for the next attorney licensing, or around the same time as the next attorney licensing fee cycle. So we will be looking at those questions next year to see if we can revise them. So I think there will be an opportunity for COAF to weigh in on that.
And we have our current working group that's addressing those. It's Yemi, Jezreel, and Tara. So that'll be really interesting work for the next year.
This next item is related to the inactive attorney survey. So this year, we had a working group look at the inactive attorney survey questions to see if we could find out more about why attorneys are going inactive and whether they might return to the law. That was one thing that came up in that working group. And so we will deploy that survey for 2025, and I anticipate there will be some findings. And so that will come back to COAF. So just a little bit of background on this item related to the guiding principles in examination development to minimize potential bias in the bar exam. So several years ago, the Office of Admissions worked with an outside statistician to look at 10 years worth of bar exam questions and performance exam tests to determine whether there was bias in the exam itself. And while the statistician did not find bias in those questions, there were several questions that were flagged that warranted further review. The board at that time created a working group of COAF members and committee of bar examiner members to look at those flagged questions. And it was very interesting what we found. Taken individually, like the questions didn't seem to have bias, but if you looked at them as a whole, oftentimes we were seeing, women portrayed as a victim, people with foreign sounding names perhaps portrayed as criminals, a lot of jargon used, cul-de-sac. You might not know what that means if you didn't grow up perhaps in a suburb. And so that working group developed these guiding principles that have been implemented in the bar exam since 2022. And so we hope, COAF wants the Office of Admissions to kind of re-examine whether those guiding principles have been useful. And I think with the new bar exam, that will be an important step to take for the Office of Admissions. So this, I think, is to, renew that recommendation.
Any questions, thoughts? All right, moving. Oh,
Can we actually go back to
Yes.
the previous,
Yes.
I don't know if they're it's goal 2, but the one right before the one we just discussed. So I know some local bar associations do some surveying around the attorney experience. One thing that comes to mind is the goals and timetable study for the San Francisco Bar Association. Are we utilizing any of that information in terms of, retention trends and other things related to attorney experience in California, or are we doing something different than what these local bar associations are doing?
To answer your first questions, I don't think we're using those, and I think probably it would be a good idea for us to look at them to just have the context in our own study. And I think our study, our census is just, we have access to, all licensed attorneys. And so hopefully we'll be able to have far greater reach and also be able to look at, retention, advancement, compensation, satisfaction, by sector, by area of the state, and have that kind of nuanced analysis.
good. Okay.
So this next item is just to explicitly allow COAF to invite researchers or other experts to come to COAF meetings to identify issues related to pipeline to the profession, and then to make recommendations. We could keep that.
Maybe this is the place to just, in case anyone's like me, clarify on what pipeline means in the state bar or COAF realm.
Beginning in law school.
Yeah, I just thought saying it explicitly, because I think for a lot of us, we think pipeline and we're thinking high school or even middle school. And so just knowing for the state bar, that's law school forward, I think is helpful on if we see anybody that we would recommend for presentations or anything like that, sort of what our scope is, at least at COAF.
So is that,
I think it's clear. I just thought this was a good time with new members and everything to just.
do you want us to put that language in?
Not necessarily. Leave ourselves a little space in case there's someone who impacts the law school part.
Okay.
That could be interesting.
But it is a good point, because I know we constantly ask about other earlier pipeline issues, and they are outside of our purview.
And Elizabeth, so this under the work plan, the language pertaining to supporting presentations to underrepresented high school and community college. So why is that crossed out again?
So this was put in several years ago when there was a concern that I guess COAF members just wanted explicit permission to be able to go do that and say they were from the Council on Access and Fairness at the State Bar. So we put that in there, but I don't think that's an issue. Like COAF members are free to make presentations to whomever they wish. And if the State Bar can support that, we're happy to. So that's why we struck it, because it didn't seem necessary.
And to add a little bit more to that, with Elizabeth's support, I know that part of our discussion was making sure that our work plan was as lean as possible and really identifying things that we are going to be focusing on so that over the next year we can say we hit everything, and that we don't have things that are like with this one, for example, creating space for folks to do things on their own rather than this is something that we will get a working group for, we will have a plan, and we will have goals over the next year. So I think that informs why some other things were removed as well, although they were aspirational, and it would be great to be doing a lot more. We have limited time and resources. So that's at least one of the reasons that things get changed or tweaked or modified.
Thank you. We had an asterisk though. I will say my personal experience is that for doing any of those types of presentations, if I've reached out to Elizabeth or anyone else in the office, they've been happy to provide light. And I've said, hey, I'd like to also mention State Bar resources that are available to people seeking law school. They've supported it by giving like, yes, here's a deck that, is lean enough that you can use, or here are resources explicitly that you can provide to these groups. And so my assumption is that none of that is going to change just because this isn't here, that we can still reach out and get those types of resources and share them broadly.
That is correct. So this one is an item that we've added partly because as it came out of the Diversity Summit. Partner with law schools, law firms, and other key stakeholders to support outreach to underrepresented communities. And I think further down, we had this longer item that's struck that was related to developing the outreach videos. So we struck that one because that seems like so specific, and we were, I think this is fair to say, COAF has kind of struggled with like how to keep that going, and what made sense to keep going. So we included this one, a one that's like a bit broader, and targeting like our stakeholders specifically, and not the modality. To provide a little bit of flexibility for COAFs, for the working group to figure out like what that might look like.
Just want to like elaborate more on what the outreach component kind of means with that, or keep it.
We could.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to keep it broad in some ways because it gives you flexibility.
Right.
So don't.
So maybe it's I mean, I think it really is like law school retention and advancement and
Pipeline issues.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that comes
Pipeline.
after, pardon me.
Yes, go.
After underrepresented communities. So it's supporting outreach to underrepresented communities regarding pipelines to the profession.
Yeah.
That was part of what I was thinking in this as well, to be sort of candid, is noting that the prior one was struck, having this and making it partnerships. I know that several of the at least the LA law schools, and I know others of the Northern California ones, have very successful programs that reach out to high schools, community colleges, et cetera. And so if there's ways that the State Bar can partner with a larger consortium of those schools, then it is in some ways doing some of that early pipeline work that is not explicitly in our purview, while empowering the partnerships that we want to see. And I was thinking for our earlier, Elizabeth, the brief update you provided on the outreach materials, it came to mind that this might be a good space. It doesn't necessarily have to be explicit in here, but I was thinking this might be a good space for working explicitly with SEAL recipients on some of these partnerships being things that SEAL recipients, I'm not as familiar with all of the items so please forgive me if there are any about like working with the community or anything where they might want to take some of these partnership opportunities as things that they could do to fulfill that action item, right? And they could say like, you could say like this partnership of, 5 State Bar Seal recipients put on X program, and then it gives prominence and it achieves this thing, and it's not quite as much on the State Bar's resources to effectuate all of that.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
I don't know that
I don't think
it's too much to put here.
Yeah, but I did add some language as you were talking. Outreach to underrepresented communities regarding law school pipeline to the profession and retention and advancement in the profession. Is that okay? Okay, great. And then our next item, so in the past we had talked about collaborating with California Lawyer Association on a summit, but that didn't come to fruition as that CLA had a summit that they put on. So I think just broadening it and to discuss how we can partner with them to advance DEI, because they do a lot of great work that I think would complement what COAF is doing.
And was CLA's summit focused on the pipeline?
It was, yeah, and I'm not sure if I know they had it for a few years. I don't know if it's what the current status is, but I thought we could broaden it.
Great.
Okay, so the next item is related to the Be a Lawyer brochure. I think it's continuing to distribute and publicize it, and then review it this year to make sure it's still relevant and updated, and make any potential revisions. Our next set of activities are related to pipeline. So as we've talked about pipeline with beginning in law school. So every year, the Office of Admissions puts on what's called the Law School Assembly. It's a convening of various law school stakeholders, and it includes the ABA approved law schools, California accredited law schools, and the registered with the State Bar law schools. And so I know in the past, various members have participated. I think, especially when we were looking at the Cal accredited rules, that working group participated. So we can work and continue to do that. As many of you know, the next item is the profile on California law schools. For those of you that attended the Diversity Summit, there's like a lot of rich information that came out of that report. And Admissions has, I think, several things that they are trying to do as a result of that report. And so I think they really value kind of COAF's feedback on those activities. So this is kind of a broad activity for us because they're still setting their agenda. I think they're actually meeting on their work plan in the next room. So this one gives us the ability to do that.
I think we have an extraneous and at the end of it.
Recommendations.
Oh,
it's like.
Oh, there it is. I see it. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. It's like, I
of
think
the
it's
header.
called
Floating header.
orphan or widow. Sorry, yeah. And then I think below we have a more specific one related to the rules for accreditation. And I'm sorry, I'm scrolling. Oops. Yeah, and then we have another one specifically on the law school accreditation process, which is the working group Shellac and Helica are working on. So that's specific because we know that that's what they're doing. So that's why there's two kind of related items. Okay, sorry for all the scrolling. Okay, I hope I'm not making you motion sick. Okay, so the next item is related to the Leadership Seal program. As Danielle reported out, we are hoping to kind of increase outreach related to it, perhaps make adjustments, look to see what other supports and benefits we can provide recipients. So that's what's this item is related to. And then the next item is study how professional civility impacts retention and advancement in the profession. And this, I think, relates back to that presentation we received from the Office of Professional Competence, I think actually at last December's meeting, where or it may have been 2 Decembers ago, where I think the issue of whether those civility guidelines may inadvertently negatively impact certain groups. And so I think we would try to see if there's any data we could look at. I think one thing that's going to be a little bit difficult with this one is that we are still waiting for the Supreme Court to act on those guidelines.
For the first one on top, the increased participation, do we want to add something about and maybe increased visibility to address Danielle's point?
Yeah. Say to whom?
Just to everybody.
I'm sorry. Can we explain that last comment? I didn't quite follow what we were adding.
So I think it was so in Danielle's presentation on the SEAL program, one of the things that she was hoping to do was to increase the visibility of organizations that have a SEAL and then just generally of the SEAL program overall. So that was what that addition was about, unless people have a different interpretation. No.
So maybe it's not to whom, but of whom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So I added of the program and participants.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Great. That's good.
Thank you.
Any thoughts on the civility item?
How does this relate to what Shalak was talking about in terms of during the break about the civility element? Like, what does it mean and the impacts it can have?
I think it was relating mainly to one, the report that the Supreme Court has been reviewing for about a year and a half now. But also, pardon me, to the inactive attorney census and finding reasons why particularly people from underrepresented groups and Asian women, I think, was the largest cohort that were leaving the profession early, and whether part of that is related to how folks are treated, whether or not their colleagues or opposing counsel are being civil and being professional or not. And whether there's anything, I mean, right now we're still in the study stage, but in theory, if we get data, for instance, that shows that one of the reasons folks are leaving the profession is because of that, then perhaps the next steps would be, is there something that we can do about it?
Do you think maybe they're reframing it because without context, just looking at I could read it as study how professional civility impacts. I think there's just different ways that you could read into what we're trying to say by professional civility, whether that's on behalf of the person, like whether they're behaving professionally, civilly. And I think it sounds like so, but the goal is to see how others behave impact whether someone stays in the profession or not.
Right.
That's fair. Yeah.
I do have a question about its placement as well. If this is if I'm reading this wrong, then shoot me down. But if this placement of this particular piece within the goals is where it should be, or if we might move this up a little bit.
So we have it listed, and I'll let, pardon me, I'll let Elizabeth correct me. I think we focused on goal 2 because it was an access issue in terms of retention, and we nested it under.
Apologize for scrolling because I'm looking to just make sure it is in the right place.
Okay, under the implementation step of promoting retention and advancement of a diverse and inclusive legal profession. But if there's a different implementation step or goal that's better suited, then that's a good point. And I'm thinking of your question too, Angelica, of how we can tweak the wording to make it more clear. And if you have suggestions.
I'm thinking, although
I have a more basic question,
Yes.
if I may.
Yeah.
Do we really, this is slightly leading, do we really need to have a study to determine the professional impact on civility? I mean, there's lots of statistics that show the answer to this question already. Why do we need to spend time on it? Why don't we talk about how to fix it rather than studying it?
I think that because for step one, at least within our purview now, is looking to our particular populations, at least as I'm interpreting some of the things that are coming in and new data that are coming in with regard to the inactive attorney census, for instance. And if there are, I'm not disagreeing with you, Tristan, about what other studies are showing. But before we move into the implementation step, getting more specific information or more specific data about where we can best focus. I wouldn't oppose saying study and address now. I suppose I was trying to be a little bit more conservative about the goals that we set for ourselves, but I'd be happy to say study and address. And if we're able to get to that this year, then fantastic. But I at least saw it as a study first, and then once we have what we need, move forward with addressing.
Can I say?
I'm sorry, I can't see anybody in the room. I apologize. Judge Rose, are we saying that our profession, the people in our profession who need to make these decisions will be more amenable to focusing on this if we can give a stat that says something like, 3% of inactive attorneys said that they left because of incivility, and that will allow us to put more focus on this issue? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
That's my thought.
I think that in part, but also it's not just it's about both sides, I suppose, or at least I'm thinking about it from both sides. One is addressing the behavior, and the other is providing support to people who are targeted by the behavior. Is that addressing your question, Tristan?
No, I don't think I guess what I was trying to figure out is this a necessary step in our role, right? To say, yes, here's the numbers in broadly, but in the legal profession, it's X impact. And then we can say, I think I see Shellac shaking her head. Then we can say, aha, so here's something we need to do about this, right? I mean, is it?
If I may, Judge Rhodes.
Please.
I think so, yes, if only because I think it might help provide clarity for the Supreme Court as they review those guidelines to have that additional information, Tristan, that says like within the California attorney population, here is the impact of these things, rather than just among a broad adult population or, or even broader attorney populations, that perhaps even if there is space to make recommendations to update the guidelines before they're put into place based on the data, especially from what I'm remembering of the conversation a couple of years ago, that while we may recognize that those things have already been studied, there was not necessarily a broader understanding of the ways that things like civility have been weaponized against underrepresented populations, or the ways that those bear out and the types of manifestations of incivility, right? So it's like, well, everyone yells in the courtroom, so what's the big deal? And not necessarily recognizing the ways those things play out. So that's my
unless
thought
you're a Black woman, right? Then you're not allowed to yell in the courtroom. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So
I totally agree with that.
That's why like the study part, I think, can be a little bit more focused towards, as you were saying, sort of the stakeholders that might need persuasion to then give a little bit more credence to the recommendations or the address part that we may want to jump straight to,
Okay, because from my perspective, this is the number one thing clients are asking me for, this civility. They want training on civility. It is inextricably entwined with diversity in my perspective. You know, that if we were trying to make people feel like they belong, if people are being rude to them you know, or mean, maybe just use a simple word, that's totally tied together. You know, there's really no way to separate it. So I see this as being a really important thing for us to focus on. And I couldn't more heartily support this inclusion in our plan. And I like the addition of make recommendations to address. So thank you for letting me speak on this one.
Thank you for having us add that, because I like action steps. Action is good.
Great.
Yeah.
And then do we want to revise like how we're framing it?
Well, can I give,
Oh, yeah.
it's not, I was at a conference where they said, it's not pushback, it's an and. So can I give an and to Angelica's, which is, I think that there's also the space for how, yes, like clarifying it's how people are treated, but also the ways that particularly underrepresented groups, intersectional underrepresented groups might be accused more of professional incivility when they're not actually being uncivil, or it's a direct response to the treatment that they're receiving and the treatment goes unaddressed, but they're treated as uncivil. So I wish there's a way for us to do both. Like, we want to study how people are being treated, but also, and maybe this is tangential to attorney complaints, right? Like, are those groups being accused of incivility more in ways that, to Tristan's point, might be because, you know, everyone else can yell except a Black woman, right? Everyone else can get visible except a larger, you know, whatever, Samoan man, right? Because of all the biases that people have, and being able to sort of both ands it. So I don't know if leaving it broad gives space for that, or we want to clarify sort of both of those things can be at play, because I can see people being like, yeah, well, I was pushed out of my firm because they kept saying I was unprofessional. I wasn't actually unprofessional. I was doing all the things everyone else does, you know, so.
It might be better to phrase it as a tripart thing, because we're not really making recommendations to address the impact. We would be making recommendations to minimize, right? So we say something like study how professional civility impacts retention and advancement in the profession, comma, or semicolon, whatever's the right way. How this is particularly impactful, or, you know, how this may particularly impact our diverse, you know, our underrepresented communities. I can't remember the language we use right now. And make, you know, if possible, make some recommendations on how to minimize this impact. Maybe that would be kind of the way to phrase it. I love what you just focused on, Shalak. I think that's really important. And I mean, yeah, right. If an Asian woman is expected to be demure and she loses her cool, that wouldn't be considered uncivil for a white man or a white woman, right? But so we have all of these stereotypes that affect us in every other aspect that are just going to be magnified in this way. I don't know if that makes sense to the group to do kind of a combo.
So I did try to draft something as Tristan was talking. So study how professional civility impacts retention and advancement in the profession, particularly underrepresented communities, and make recommendations to address how to minimize these impacts on, we can just minimize these impacts.
I like that. What does everybody else think?
Angelica, does that get to what you were addressing to? I don't mean to pick on you, but I do appreciate you pointing it out. It's important. Thank you, Tristan, for your suggestions too. I think that this is in a much better and more focused place.
Excellent.
Great. Okay, because it's hard to type in front of screen where everybody's watching. Okay, so this next one, I think, goes to looking at kind of like other forms of diversity, kind of going off, launching off of the research on the innovative DEI practices work. So identify and study other forms of diversity, for example, neurodiversity, generational differences. I have a proposal to perhaps add wellness here. relevant to the profession.
Is that diversity, wellness?
I think it impacts diversity.
Yeah, I think what I'm specifically thinking about is just the number of people in the legal profession who identify as having a disability that is mental health related, and how wellness goes to that, and wellness goes to, you know, people's stress levels in the profession. So I think that's something for discussion, whether wellness and sort of stress level contributing to people, you know, having both diagnosed mental health issues and undiagnosed mental health issues as a result of their profession, essentially. But I think some people could say it's too attenuated and not really in scope, but something I thought we should discuss.
Could we include mental health as one of the categories there? Kamal, would that, I think that was Kamal, would that address your thought? I think that's a great point. Like neurodiversity, mental and behavioral health.
Yeah, and that might be more, I think it might get to the point more than simply saying wellness.
Well, because wellness, I think, comes on the other end, right? Like how to fix it, right? How to focus on it. Maybe that could be make recommendations as appropriate, including, you know, you could say something like, for example, wellness, if you wanted to see that word as part of our plan. The other category that we could add here, because I think this came out of the stuff Shellac and I were working on, is communication style. I don't know if that's something people really feel like they're being discriminated against, but it's one of the things I always talk about. So I just offer it up, but maybe it doesn't rise to the level of being included here. Meaning you have your introverts and your extroverts at a firm, and the introverts are not valued the same as the extroverts, even though the extroverts aren't any smarter, right? Something that we usually talk about. Well, it sometimes helps the audience to get their minds around what kinds of things are diverse, right? And it's not a scary one. It's not like, oh, she's calling me a racist. You know, no, I'm not. In this moment, I'm just talking about communication style. I'll call you racist later. Just a little levity.
Have we covered socioeconomic diversity in the past?
We haven't. And I'm only pausing because I'm just trying to think of what data we collect from attorneys. I don't know if we collect that kind of data, but that is interesting.
Something
Part
you
of what
might.
Sorry, go ahead, Tara.
Oh, no, sorry. So I was going to just say that a way to get to that piece with what we have currently might be through first generation. I think we collect that, Elizabeth, right now? First generation data? It won't capture it all, but.
I know we collect first gen data when law students participate in the bar strategies and stories legal mindsets program, but I don't know how that is connected to like our attorney census data. But we can add it and explore it.
I wonder if that helps to broaden this. So in the examples given, neurodiversity, mental and behavioral wealth, generational differences, you know, maybe after that comma, we put socioeconomic status, first generation. What was the other one interesting? Oh, communication and leadership styles. That might be getting too attenuated. Like, then what's the point?
I think it might be.
But if we put a few things there, then that also expands our wellness, our recommendations as appropriate, including, for example, wellness. Well, no, there's no appetite for loan repayment. I was thinking of things that go to socioeconomic, but maybe then it's like one or two recommendations that kind of hit each of those things, you know? And it gives us a little bit broader space and opportunities, going back to my word for the day, for partnerships. Like, I know most, at least the ABA accredited schools, I got the impression from Dean Freiberg on Wednesday that the Cal accredited as well may collect that first gen information. So maybe it's that the state bar doesn't necessarily have to do it through the attorney census. Maybe it's asking for reaching out to the law schools for some of that information. Maybe it's encouraging leadership seal recipients to start collecting that information and thinking about how that might impact the ways people are showing up in their organizations. So our recommendations can be even broader and impact more of our stakeholders.
I wonder if it would make sense to change the framing of it at the top. It's just like
Yep.
identify and study often forgotten forms of diversity or less, less frequently considered, because they were kind of highlighting it, right? These are also things to think about. And we ought to include veteran status as well here.
Veteran status is a demographic category that the State Bar does collect data on. The State
Okay.
Bar's demographic categories are based in the government code,
Right.
actually related to judicial evaluation. And so it includes disability status and veteran status, in addition to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation.
Right. Well, I mean, age is also included in the federal, but we've got it here. Generational, right? And mental and behavioral health is a disability. So we definitely have some things that are already covered in the other collection. Because we're not talking about just collecting new stuff, right? We're talking about how can we help our profession address these things and make the broadest possible segment of our people, students and then attorneys, feel included in the profession, right? So that they can better represent the public.
Right. And I just always go back to data, because that's what, at the State Bar where we like to start. What do we have? What does that show? So, but your point is well taken.
Okay, so we've added a lot here as well, and I think it's been a good discussion. I get nervous when we add things because, again, I want to make sure that we hit all of these goals, and I love that this group has high aspirations, and I'm sure we will meet them. It just means everybody's going to get a lot of working groups assigned, and that we'll be able to tackle it.
Well, Judge Rhodes, we've already done the first part. In this conversation, we've identified.
We have identified.
The working group can just go check in January and done. Now
What we could do on this goal is have it be identify things for future COAF effort, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe this year we figure out some of the types of diversity that we don't usually focus on and see if we think any of those are particularly impactful and require additional study and focus on recommendations and maybe a training, as opposed to trying to make recommendations to fix all of these things, right?
Right.
I think that's a really good point, and a good way of sort of triaging and identifying where our efforts are best placed. I think we can get there if we mostly keep this. I'm wondering, just looking at it now, whether we should not include the wellness language at the end and just say make recommendations as appropriate, just because it sounds like those recommendations could be specific action items like wellness, or as Tristan just said, the recommendation is next year, focus on this particular group for these particular traits. Does that sound good to folks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to add even more to the list, but we don't address religion, right? And that's also something that the State Bar doesn't collect, right? Another thing that came to mind when we were talking about communication style was actually cultural differences, which I think can potentially cover. I mean, not that communication style is necessarily about culture, but it does sort of raise that for me. It's different cultural norms. I think that's a lot, and at least cultural differences is really pretty vague and amorphous in my mind. But I just wanted to throw that out there as stuff that I don't think is looked at enough.
I agree with you.
Sounds like you're leading the working group.
Yes.
To identify and then study.
I don't know that we need to list everything in there. I mean, we've listed a lot. I hope that you will join that working group if it's something that you're interested in, and that can certainly be something that we think about for future action items too. Because I do, yeah, it captures a lot of things.
Elizabeth,
Okay.
I wonder if there was phrasing for the innovative DEI practices working group that was along the lines of what Tristan was saying to identify, study, and it was like make recommendations or something to COAF, and I wonder if is there, oh, we didn't actually say that, we just said identify and study, okay, because I was thinking like if we could copy that language, because the point of that working group, at least from what I remember
Yes,
with Tristan,
yes.
was that we were looking at things that might be suggested to COAF for
Yes.
future work,
Mhm.
so.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I think anything that we're like identifying and studying is to figure out, is there something for COAF and the state
Okay.
bar to do?
So maybe we don't need to say it explicitly that this might lead to future plans or something.
Yeah, I don't think we need to say it explicitly.
All right, I really appreciate this discussion. Thank you all. Let's go down to the next one then.
Okay, so the next one is planning to participate in our diversity summits. Just,
Can I?
yes.
Why that isn't ongoing and like.
It is ongoing, so I was actually just gonna say, I think because I've been adding things, the columns aren't aligning anymore. So I will fix all of these so that they align when before it gets finalized. Yeah, because it should, yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah, it is ongoing. Okay. And then I think with the diversity summits, we've agreed at least, well, one in person and then one remote, and then we'll figure out kind of the other configuration. The working group will figure out the configuration of sector specific, et cetera.
And perhaps using some of those previous topics to give inspiration for working group or sector specific.
Yeah.
Subjects as well.
Yeah. Oops. Okay. And then the next two items are related to the two topics that Abraham went over in the that came out of the Innovative Practices Working Group. So it's to study AI tools utilized in legal employment processes and identify best practices to mitigate bias. Do you think that language is okay?
I like that, Elizabeth. And I think it was last year, was contacted by a judge from the NAWJ. They were doing some work on this issue. So it may be that we could combine and capture some of what they have already done. I know there's going to be slightly different focus, right? It'll be on things like sentencing and things like that, but that could be good work to combine.
Okay.
I think I had forwarded you maybe, or Danielle, there was a presentation, a webinar or something that I've been invited to that was specifically around this, AI and employment. And I can look it up again to try to remember what firm or organization was putting that webinar on.
Okay, that would
Because
be
that
great.
may be something, even for a presentation to us at a future meeting, that could be useful.
I mean, the answer is bad, right? Don't use it. Don't use it to hire people or sentence them.
Great, we've done our training for the AI tool. Thank you, Tristan. I suspect that there's going to be a lot of bar organizations in California, but across the country, that are talking about how AI is going to be impacting them. I know it comes up at almost every meeting that I've been at that's organizational. So if you folks see other types of presentations or speakers or topics that might fall into this, you can forward them to Elizabeth, and she can make sure that the working group gets that information too.
Elizabeth,
It was on AI and disability.
Sorry.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Did the presentation that I sent you, Elizabeth, get to the working group?
We don't have a working group yet.
Oh, okay.
So so it is still in my inbox, but will be sent.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next item is increase awareness and address challenges faced by attorneys and legal organizations in rural areas.
I think that does the same lift of setting it on the table and leaving it to the working group to move us forward in the way that is best presented once they studied the topic a little bit more.
Yeah.
Great.
This could be included in the parent. I'm sorry, Judge Rhodes.
No, go
It could
ahead.
be included in the parenthetical as just geographical. Unless it should be highlighted out separate here.
Yeah, I think that because this was the one of the innovative practices that you were involved in developing, we really wanted to bring it to the forefront.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is another working group that we have yet to identify. We have a couple, because these are new additions to the work to the work plan. We will roll out new working groups and solicit volunteers from everybody. Great.
So this item is related to the Mindsets in Legal Education Initiative, which is sometimes called the California Strategies and Stories Program. It is an intervention available to all bar takers to target stereotype threat and imposter syndrome. COAF received a presentation from Dr. Quintanilla and his research team at the last COAF meeting about the findings. It has had really remarkable results for first gen and underrepresented groups for bar passage. And so this is an intervention that the State Bar is committed to continuing. Because of that, I don't think COAF no longer needs to monitor it. I do want to note that many, many years ago, actually, this intervention was recommended to the board to implement. And so it's really had a great impact. Okay. I think we've talked a little bit about loan repayment assistance programs and how it might impact diversity in the profession. A couple years ago, COAF did do a lot of work related to LRAPs for various reasons. The State Bar isn't doing an LRAP specifically, but I think we could put here just reviewing available data. Because there is now an Access Commission supported loan repayment assistance program that's available. And I believe the Student Aid Commission has also started an LRAP for public interest attorneys. So I think monitoring kind of what's happening with it to keep up and make potential recommendations depending on what that yields would be something useful for COAF to continue to do.
Great. Any other input? Nope. Next then. Okay. Thank you.
So this is working with admissions on the law school accreditation process, which we'll continue to do. And then this actually might be our last item. So this is our implicit bias online module that's available on the State Bar's e-learning platform. So we've developed the module. And so I would like to monitor the feedback on the module and so that we can make recommendations to improve it in the future. But because developing these modules is very resource intensive, my recommendation is that we just monitor this module for now, and perhaps in 3 years, we would want to update it or change or develop a different kind of MCLE, but for at least 2025, just monitor it.
Does that need to say monitor feedback as opposed to, or monitor?
Oh, yeah.
The...
Or I don't know why I use the word monitor. It could be just.
Oh, okay. I just wasn't sure.
Sorry, I don't know.
Okay, and then I don't know.
Yeah.
Any questions or other suggestions?
We're missing from the.
Yeah. Is there
Any other suggestions that we haven't touched on? Yeah. Okay.
Great.
So Elizabeth, please correct me because I don't remember if we've gone through this. The work plan will be submitted to the Board of Trustees for approval. Mm-hmm. And then assuming the Board of Trustees signs off on everything, then we'll have our work plan, but we won't be able to make further additions from this point forward once it's approved by the Board of Trustees. But we have, I think as part of our discussion showed, or a lot of our discussion showed, built in broad enough areas that will give us room to explore a lot. And there's a lot of work here. I don't think that we are going to be wanting for things to work on over the next year. And frankly, I'm excited on the one hand that we're going to be identifying a lot of things to be looking at in future years, but I'm also a little sad because this will be my last year on COAF. So I'll have to monitor that progress from the other side of the committee.
So then in terms of forming working groups, we wait for approval and then we determine what working groups come out of the plan.
What new working groups? I think some of the work that's existing
Would continue.
will continue. I don't see any reason why the board would ask us not to continue it.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the new work, for the new working groups.
If we're creating new ones, we're hitting the pause button on that until the approval. Okay.
No, I think you want to sign her up right now. I think
That's
ready.
what I
Not
was
for you
hearing.
right now.
Circulate the sheet.
I'm confident they'll be approved.
Yeah.
You'll get an email when your first meeting is scheduled.
Yeah, I will note that the board usually meets in January, but that they've changed their meeting schedule. So their first meeting won't be till February. So I anticipate, depending on what work is involved, some work will need to begin in January because we need all that time to accomplish our goals. So, we may form some of the working groups a little early.
Elizabeth will facilitate
Yeah.
that though.
I will figure
do not
all that
worry.
out.
But has the board ever denied or requested to revise any particular goals presented?
No. So we do need to have a motion to recommend that this recommend that the board approve this work plan.
So moved.
I move. Oh,
We'll have Shalak, our vice chair, as the initial motion, and Tristan is the second. Thank you, Tristan.
thank you.
And Elizabeth will take a roll call vote. Aye, nay, or abstain.
Yemi? Kamal?
Aye.
Tara?
Aye.
Cecilia?
Aye.
Jezreel? Tristan?
Aye.
Angelica? Yusuf?
Aye.
Shalak?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
We have 6 ayes, 0 noes, motion carries.
Excellent. Then our work plan will be sent to the Board of Trustees, and I'm very excited to get started on all of it.
Yes.
Thank you all. So that is really our agenda for today. The only other agenda item that we had was our update from Pam Enslin, who's our liaison for the California Leadership Access Workforce, the law group. And she's not here, unfortunately, so we'll hear from them at our next meeting. So at this time, I will adjourn and we will see you all at our next meeting, which is, I should know this, but I don't, it's in March. So we'll see you all in March. That one will be entirely on Zoom. So until we meet each other again virtually. And thank you again, especially to Judge Diaz and to Eric Silber for joining us as our new liaisons. We really look forward to working with you this year and hopefully for the many years that you may stay on as our liaisons to those great organizations. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you all.
Good.
Thank
Good
you.
year.
Bye-bye.
You too.